If I had to guess the motivations of the developers at Square in the early 90s, I'd call Final Fantasy VI the culmination of their desire to present a classic two-dimensional RPG as cinematically as the tech of the time allowed. Their ambition would continue into 3D with this game's better-known follow-up and beyond, as well as back to 2D again with their more recent so-called HD 2D style efforts, such as the wonderful Triangle Strategy. But as someone who rates several of the earlier Final Fantasies very high, stay tuned for my series ranking, FF6 provided a visual and oral feast. My Final Fantasy Newcomer's Perspective series started with the goal to play what I considered the 16 mainline games at the time. I don't count the MMOs, FF16 hadn't come out yet either, and I won't get to it soon, so this marks the end of my journey, for now. And what a game to end on. I knew 6 was a fan favorite, certainly the old school 2D favorite. Now I know why. And while I don't love it as much as some other entries for reasons I'll explain, its stark impact on the genre I enjoy most was clear from its opening all the way to the final scenes, for better and also for worse. FF6 is one creative RPG with a lot of ideas cooking at once, where for every few bits that work, there's another that doesn't quite hit the mark. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's maybe no higher point in this game than its legendary intro sequence, one I immediately recognized thanks to cultural osmosis. I've seen that famous mech-walking snow scene in tons of YouTube videos and whatnot over the years, and while I did have the vague notion that was part of FF6's intro, I can't say the same for the music. Oh, I was already familiar with Terra's theme as well, again just from being a nerd on the internet, but I didn't know how 6 would use that particular piece. I certainly didn't expect it to open the game, nonetheless get used as a leitmotif throughout. The coolest part of the intro though is how it flows right from the title screen into the action, a step toward a more cinematic presentation for Final Fantasy. In fact, the opening's cliff background doesn't look much worse than something you'd see in, say, Final Fantasy IX, a testament to the power of this kind of curated sequence that would take greater hold in the industry for decades to come. It's neat how this scene's got two different scrolling effects, one for the snowy ground and one for the backdrop of mountains and buildings, which work together in parallax, and it goes on and on for quite a while, much longer than you might expect from a 90s game. A city rolls into view as these lumbering machines approach the horizon, the music keeps building, and I'm left in awe by the magnificence and technical detail on display. This has got to be about as good as a SNES game can look. Hell, from a distance, I could be fooled into thinking this sequence is in 3D. It's well put together stuff, and by the way, I played the original SNES version, none of those fancy remakes for me. I did, however, use a translation patch aptly titled Final Fantasy VI Retranslated by Harry Hen. If you're wondering why play a fan-tran of a game we got in English, well, the original Final Fantasy III, as it was called in the US on first release, came out in an era when JRPG localizations tended to heavily deviate from the original Japanese, often failing to convey parts of the intended meaning. These scripts were almost as bad as the DEI-infected slop jobs we get today, which suffer from different problems I won't go into here. Me, I always prefer a more faithful translation, even if that means the occasional bit of stilted dialogue. That is what FF6 Retranslated offers, and it gets the old Leon thumbs up. I encountered zero dialogue that sounded weird or didn't make sense, and while the patch itself has a few bugs, you should never run into them through normal play. So do yourself a favor and leave the Woolseyisms in the past. While you're at it, consider leaving a like on this video, or maybe even subscribing to the channel if you like this kind of retrospective. I do a lot of them, it's free, and it really helps the channel reach more RPG fans. And thank you to everyone who's already subscribed. After that compelling opening, the focus shifts to the mysterious green-haired girl with a ponytail, one of the mech pilots alongside the legendary Biggs and Wedge. Their names are of course borrowed from Star Wars, but more importantly to Final Fantasy lore, they become stock names used in later games, similar to Sid. I love when developers take the time to include in-series Easter eggs like this. They make games feel more special, and it's especially cool when they're used for villains, such as here and in FF8. Though I'd wager Biggs and Wedge will always be comic relief with names like those, indeed also the case in 8. Here, these two chaps are running the show and are after a frozen Esper located inside a remote mine. It's not explained what exactly an Esper is, but since there's a whole menu option for it, I'm guessing we'll find out soon. What's more, Miss Greenhair can apparently use magic in a world where magic has been long lost. Yeah, she's the key to this whole operation. Biggs and Wedge have her under mind control by an unusual device on her head, which they plan to use to control her magic and interface with the Esper. As a side note, the mechs everyone's piloting are powered by magic tech. This universe is analog to high technology, not actual magic despite the name. We won't find out more quite yet though. Our trio does find the allegedly frozen Esper, but it ends up Thanos snapping Biggs and Wedge out of existence, after which the girl blacks out. In a presentational touch I appreciate, after waking up in the strange town of Narshe, a name input screen reveals this gal's called Terra. Again, FF6 is all about presentation, and here the more mechanical stuff like choosing a character name flows naturally from the gameplay, never feeling like it's interrupting you or coming at a weird time. Think about it, why would you want to name your characters before you've even gotten a chance to know them? Nowadays when I boot up an RPG, I expect to get right into either the story or action, and FF6 delivered that all the way back in 1994. It's not the first to do it, FF4 comes to mind, just sticking with the same series, but here it's smoother and less intrusive than ever, so 6 deserves major props. That said, Terra doesn't actually know her name. Yep, she's caught a classic case of JRPG amnesia. I'm still willing to excuse that trope coming from the SNES era as it hadn't been overused by that point, but we're getting close to the cutoff. Still, it's a gimmick that works pretty well in a video game, so I won't complain further. Through Terra's eyes, we learn the steely Emperor Gestal dominates this unnamed world with an iron fist, and that one of his henchmen named Kefka is the one who put that mind-controlling crown on Terra. Spoiler alert, he's gonna be important later. In a sepia-tinged backstory scene, she battles unmarked soldiers where it's implied she was forced to kill using her innate magical powers, all while retaining none of her memories. Although since any old human can use Magitech mechs to destroy stuff, it's not yet clear what the Empire wanted with Terra and the Esper in the first place. Speaking of the Empire, Gestal's got quite an imposing and overtly evil army. There's no shades of gray here. His followers even throw up Roman salutes. Yeah, the analogy ain't subtle, but it doesn't have to be. We've got an obvious bad faction and an obvious hero who's got problems to overcome before she can save the day. I like it. Gameplay-wise, the first thing I noticed is there's a run button. Hallelujah. Okay, it wasn't in the original SNES release, but later versions had it, as well as the retranslated patch I played. And you can use it from the minute you gain control. No special item required, no corny stamina meter, just a run button. Every JRPG needs this. Holding a button to run is satisfying in a way that simply having a higher default walk speed isn't. I also noticed several menu options that don't do anything yet, such as Espers, Magic, and Relics, a tantalizing hook that had me eager to find out how the devs at Square would innovate on the gameplay this time around. If Final Fantasy's known for anything, it's being unafraid of change, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. Terra, while pursued by the town guards, stumbles into a nearby cave and promptly gets knocked out. The viewpoint shifts once more, cause you see, while Terra's the de facto protagonist, she's part of an ensemble of main characters, each with their own fleshed out backstories and role to play in the conflict to come. Live Alive, a later RPG by Square that I very much recommend, shares a similar structure, telling independent stories that only overlap at the very end. This has a unique charm, but Final Fantasy VI handles things in a slightly more traditional way. Characters' paths cross much sooner, with party members frequently swapping in or out during the adventure until the late game point where you can freely choose your party from a cast of up to 14. How ambitious, though it's not my favorite structure. I prefer sticking with one party for most or all of an RPG, watching them grow. But FF6's approach is a nice change of pace, and it's easy enough to ignore the characters you don't feel like using once their story stuff is done. Next, we follow Locke, who's part of the Returners, a resistance group. He's confident his city's people have the strength to take on Emperor Gestal if they didn't lack spirit. He figures finding the magical green-haired girl he saw running from the city guards might give them the hope they need. Like the thief he is, he drops into the cave on a rope and with the help of some Moogles from Narshe manages to fight off the guards, rescue Terra, and get the hell out of there. There's some party swapping here where you temporarily control a band of Moogles led by future party member Mog, which for me breaks up the pacing too much. That'll become a common theme in this retrospective. FF6 likes to experiment a lot in ways that aren't necessarily fun. My efficiency-oriented brain would just rather stick with Locke, who would at least be able to benefit from the XP here. Am I nuts? Yeah, probably, so let's continue to Figaro Castle. There we meet King Edgar, a playboy king who cares more about getting into Terra's pants than taking advantage of her magical abilities. My man. Outwardly, he's aligned with the Empire while secretly working with the Returners along with Locke, so it's no surprise that his true allegiance becomes apparent once Kefka, one of Gestal's main lackeys, shows up to cause trouble. Now, even if you've never played FF6, you've probably heard of Kefka, quite possibly the most famous Final Fantasy villain. For now, his ridiculous jester costume and campy dialect could cause you to dismiss him as comic relief, if not for how he sets fire to Figaro Castle before demanding Edgar hand over Terra. Edgar, still eager to clap Terra's cheeks, instead decides to run for it, only not literally, at least not yet. As it happens, his castle represents the pinnacle of technology in this world and is in fact a mobile fortress, able to vanish beneath the sands to protect the people of Figaro. That's a neat trick that'll come in handy again down the line, but for now Edgar, along with Locke and Terra, escape on chocobos and decide to meet with Bannon, leader of the Returners, to further investigate Terra's powers. She seems to be the key to taking down Gestal after all. The next location, Figaro Cave, exemplifies another of FF6's new features. Item chests in certain dungeons and towns will contain different items if you wait till later in the game to open them. This sounds like something an obsessive player should look up ahead of time, but the late game items aren't that much better and the game is easy enough that this never matters anyway. If you're like me and somehow avoided this game all these years, go ahead and open chests when you find them. You won't be missing much. After traveling through the town of South Figaro, past a cabin owned by a certain sibling of Edgar's we'll soon meet, and through a cave at nearby Mount Colts, the party is jumped by a shadowy figure who's been stalking them. This is Vargas, a minor boss who mostly serves to introduce us to Sabin, Edgar's twin brother. These two once trained under Vargas's father, who chose Sabin as his successor, leaving Vargas to stew in envy. Sabin shows up to take him on mano a mano with his special skill set. Now's a good time to highlight the gameplay differences between party members, an expansion on FF4's formula and one of the most fleshed out mechanics of this game. There's no class changes here. Instead, most characters get their own unique menu options in battle, such as Locke's ability to steal or Edgar's tools, which are special, infinitely reusable items he finds that makes him pretty broken throughout the adventure. Turns out being able to deal strong damage with zero cost or downside is highly useful. Who could have guessed? Sabin, on the other hand, is a martial arts master who's got an option reminiscent of fighting games called Blitz, where you input button combos to execute special attacks. It's a cool concept, but Sabin's damage kinda sucks and he's all but useless when you screw up one of these combos, so I tended to leave him out of my party whenever I could. Oh well, I at least appreciate Square's creativity with this one, and thankfully some future party members have kits actually worth using. Finally, Terra can use magic from the get-go. She starts with basic healing, poison, and fire spells, however, magic isn't her unique ability. All characters will eventually be able to learn spells, but I'll get into that whole system more in a bit. It's a doozy. Combat itself is more of the same for SNES Final Fantasy, with the return of the active time battle system and not much else new aside from said character abilities. I'm not a big fan of ATB since, contrary to its intended purpose, it makes you wait more, causing battles to take even longer than a standard turn-based game. Though I don't mind it too much, I'm certainly used to it by now. The party links up with Bannon at the Returner's hideout, who, though he becomes a temporary party member, is nothing notable in that respect. You've just got to make sure he doesn't die. When a warning comes that the Empire has taken South Figaro, Locke chooses to go and try to slow their approach toward the hideout while the rest of the group escapes down a nearby river. After chasing away the not-so-fearsome octopus/squid boss Ultros, Sabin gets a little too heated and decides to dive in after it, separating him from the party. Here, in another genre innovation reminiscent of Live Alive, the player gets to choose the order in which to tackle the next 3 scenarios: Locke striking out on his own, Sabin washed up at some remote location, or Terra, Bannon, and Edgar as they continue on to Narshe. Locke's scenario's the quirkiest one, so let's start there. It picks up after he's done what he can to undermine the Empire's forces off-screen, and now just needs to escape South Figaro. In yet another mechanic Square would later reuse in Live Alive, the intrepid thief steals a merchant's outfit, and later a guard's uniform, to use to sneak into the town's hidden dungeon. This happens through gameplay, literally by using the steal command in battle, and in a completely unnecessary yet hilarious touch only Square would bother with, there's even a custom sprite for when these poor dudes lose their clothes. FF6 loves including one-off details like this, and it's all the better for it. Locke also learns the Empire is planning on attacking Narshe next, setting up a major conflict to come. But we'll get there. First, in the dungeons, Locke meets new party member Celis, a general of the Empire who Kefka nonetheless locked up for questioning his intention to poison the citizens of the nearby kingdom of Doma. Well damn, that's harsh. Locke frees her, she decides she's done with the Empire, and the pair makes their way to Narshe in a battle-laden journey. Celis is a special type of mage similar to FF5's Mystic Knight, in that her runic ability combines magic with the use of certain weapons. It lets her absorb spells cast by enemies to restore MP. However, this is largely useless aside from a few boss battles where she really needs the extra MP. I preferred using her as one of my main spellcasters alongside Terra. Terra, Bannon, and Edgar's scenario is short and relatively uneventful. After getting turned away by the guards at Narshe, despite Edgar insisting he's the king of Figaro, they sneak into the city by way of a cave with a secret entrance Locke told them about. Apparently, the cave was used for training city guard recruits and features a lame puzzle where you have to follow a specific route. This isn't challenging or even very fun, it's more of a time waster to break up the gameplay. I'm thankful FF6 doesn't do stuff like this too often, but it is the start of the kind of weird, custom sequences the series would become so fond of later on. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy X too. Man, that game has some annoying movement puzzles. Anyway, after congregating with a colony of Muggles who have taken up residence in the cave, our trio reaches a returner's safe house where they discuss how best to persuade the townsfolk to join the resistance. And that's the whole scenario. Pretty boring, lots of walking, and very little combat. Not exactly FF6's strongest point. I'd rather the game just tell me that these 3 made it back to Narshe instead of making me play through it. Oh well, at least Sabin's scenario has a lot more going on. It sees him washed up in an unknown location where he asks a ninja-looking dude called Shadow for directions back to Narshe. Shadow informs him there is no way back except through the kingdom of Doma, where the Empire's heading next. Uh-oh, we already know what they're planning to do there. It's cool how Doma was mentioned in Locke's scenario, so if you played his first, you'll have an idea of what's to come, or if you play as Sabin first, you'll have more context for why Celis betrayed the Empire. That's some well-crafted video game storytelling that wouldn't work in any other medium. I haven't mentioned Shadow yet, but he's an assassin for hire who pops up a few times earlier in the adventure to give vague commentary and generally seem mysterious. That's kinda his whole thing. We'll get his backstory throughout the game while sleeping at inns, but for now, he offers to guide Sabin to Doma as a party member. Temporarily, of course. He is a mercenary out only for himself. Yeah, he's kind of a bitch, constantly leaving the party, and also isn't super useful in battle, at least not for my playstyle. Along the way, the two encounter an Imperial base in the desert where they help a man named Cyan fend off a horde of soldiers. He's a samurai from Doma and becomes yet another playable character once Sabin convinces him to team up. They, borrow some Magitech mechs to fight their way out in a well-executed reuse of that mechanic from the opening. It doesn't outstay its welcome, however, as they ditch the mechs to head into the spooky Phantom Forest. And spooky it is. After various mishaps, the trio find themselves in front of a ghost train? Worse, they decide to board it? Oh boy, this is bound to be wild. And that's no lie, as the party fights a cluster of undead monstrosities before finally facing the phantom train itself? Yeah, in one of the most memed scenes of the game, Sabin can even suplex the train in a moment of over-the-top ridiculousness. I love it. Though Final Fantasy VI mostly sticks to serious storytelling, it doesn't lack the flavor of silliness introduced in 5, it's just a little more rare. Anyhow, this is a pretty easy fight that'll quickly end regardless of your strategy. Sabin and Cyan eventually make it down to a plains area called the Veldt, where they meet Gal, a feral, cave-dwelling wild child who helps them find a water-breathing helmet that can take them to the next island, Nicaea. But let's talk about Gal for a sec, cause he's my favorite unit in the game, with an ability all to himself that wholly shapes his playstyle. You could loosely compare him to the Blue Mage from FF5, cause he learns attacks used by monsters via his leap technique, which removes him from the fight, only to return with a new ability available via his rage command. The catch is that leap only works when fighting on his home island, aka the Veldt. Like the Blue Mage, these abilities range from useless to nearly game-breaking. I spent entirely too much time grinding on the Veldt due to its strange mechanics that determine when certain monsters appear, but hey, I love Gal and his learned rages are incredibly valuable, such as Tyrannor with its AoE potential for destruction that rivals the ranks of the legendary Meteor spell, or Cat Scratch, which deals huge single-target damage despite its tame name. He can even learn the super useful, enticing charm ability from the Reflacia enemy that makes foes attack their opponents instead of the party. Yeah, Gal is utterly broken if you take the time to train against enough baddies on the Veldt to learn these essential skills, which can take forever, but it's the kind of grind that to me feels worth it, despite the game's overall lack of challenge. What can I say, I like being overpowered even when not necessary. That brings me to one of this entry's biggest flaws, at least the way I see it. All in all, FF6 is one super easy game. I'm talking way too easy. There's not a semblance of challenge in the entire adventure, even if you don't go out of your way to grind. While the story's interesting, as a gameplay first guy, I often had no gameplay reason to press on. Compare this to something like Romance and Saga 2, which had me obsessed with tracking every little variable and detail to build my party up while advancing the story to unlock new classes, characters, and strategies. Especially in a 2D game, I need more than just story to hold my interest. But I'll do my best to summarize the plot anyway, cause there's a lot of meat on 6's bones and things are about to kick into high gear. Eventually, Sabin reaches the island of Nicaea, where he, Cyan, and Shadow charter a ship back to the mainland to meet up with everyone else at Narshe. Yep, the scenarios have all converged, and just in time too. It's all-out war as Kefka pursues the Esper. In the Battle of Narshe, you have to split your party into 3 groups and push toward Kefka, who runs away before the parties can take him down. At this point, he still comes off a little like an unserious, bumbling fool despite his evil deeds, but he'll get a lot scarier later on. After that underwhelming fight, Terra communicates with the frozen Esper they successfully protected from Kefka's clutches, then transforms into a naked, purple-haired magical lady and flies away? What the heck? Her powers must be greater than anyone thought. So it's off to find her, which involves picking a party of 4 to cross a mountain to reach the thieves' town of Zozo. I like that you get to choose your favorite characters here instead of being forced into any specific party. And if you bring luck, along the way you'll get his backstory, where his lover Rachel was accidentally injured while adventuring with him, turned amnesiac, then later killed during an Imperial raid on her village. That's grim, a theme that'll continue for most party members' backstories. However, in an odd twist, an old wizard dude has been preserving her body until Locke can find a so-called legendary treasure to resurrect her. Much later on, Locke is of course able to do this via the Phoenix Esper, restore her memories, and have a final moment with Rachel before she dies again, for real. I'm not a fan of this plot decision because it feels shoehorned in to give Locke an arbitrarily happy ending. FF6 loves this kind of thing, yet to me it'd be more satisfying if he simply had a tragic past which he learned to get over on his own. At least it ties into gameplay by giving the party a powerful resource to use in battle called a magicite, which we'll learn all about soon. When the party eventually does find Terra, she's being kept at the top of a tower in Zozo by Rama, an Esper who takes the shape of an old man and should be familiar to anyone who's played the rest of the series. In case you haven't figured it out yet, this game's Espers are the equivalents of summons from previous games, only implemented in a different way gameplay-wise, and there's more of them than ever. Rama explains how Espers and humans used to live together until a war broke out, due to humans infusing themselves with Esper's power in order to use magic. Out of fear, the Espers sealed their kind behind a powerful magical barrier. 20 years ago, however, humans discovered that barrier and began hunting Espers, namely Gestal, who, as we know, wants them for his army and now keeps them in his Magitech research facility. So, the Espers erected a giant gate to keep humans out of their land for good. Rama also gives the party a bunch of magicite, finally unlocking that Esper option on the menu screen. See, a magicite is basically the magical essence of an Esper, which can be used to teach any party member magic, or let them summon that Esper in battle, like in previous games. But the former is really where the fun is at, since each magicite, or Esper, offers a certain set of spells, all of which can be used by a character if they equip that Esper. However, each spell can be trained up to 100%, after which it becomes permanently available to that unit, even without the relevant Esper equipped. This is like if FF5's entire class system were condensed into a single menu option, a staggering feat when you consider party members such as Gal, who have their own unique ability system that can be used in conjunction with Espers. There's a ton of flexibility here. If you're similar to me, you're constantly swapping around Espers to give your spellcasters all the strongest magic, as well as having plenty of healing options spread across the rest of your squad. It makes for a grindy experience if you get obsessive over this, but also like in FF5, it goes quicker when facing tougher enemies. I suppose it also makes the game even easier, but it's the core new mechanic of Final Fantasy VI, so I see no reason why a player wouldn't want to make the most of it. Broken mechanics exist for a reason. I just wish FF6 had more optional tough bosses or dungeons to test your skills, even with all these resources at your disposal. For an example of this done right, look at Octopath Traveler and its super bosses that are hard even for a high-level party with the best skills. Anyway, back to our story in the tower. Rama decides his time on this world is up as well, and transforms himself into yet another magicite. Well, that's handy, if a tad abrupt. Terra, on the other hand, is sleeping or in some kind of coma, and not in any condition to rejoin the party after experiencing her transformation, so the party decides to split up again to both refortify Narshe in case of another attack, and to infiltrate the Empire, since Celis is pretty sure Kefka plans to drain the Espers he's captured of their power. She, Locke, and 2 other units of the player's choice head to the nearby wealthy town of Jador to ask the aristocrats there for help getting to the southern continent, where the Empire lies. I gotta admit, I'm lukewarm on all the party picking going on so far. As mentioned, I'd rather stick with a small team of characters for most or all of an RPG instead of constantly splitting up a larger squad, but that's a matter of taste more than anything, not necessarily a knock on the game. I just think you get to know characters better when you're with the same party the whole time. At Jador, they learn from a panicked man about a plot to kidnap Maria, the star of his opera performance, who just so happens to look a lot like Celis. This guy is the impresario of the opera company down south, who of course insists the show must go on, leaving behind a ransom note from the self-styled wandering gambler who just so happens to own the only airship in the world. The party figures that could be useful, so they too rush to the nearby opera house to begin one of the most famous scenes in the game, for good reason. This is Square firing on all cylinders, if you'll excuse the use of that expression from someone who's more into RPGs than combustion engines. I am, however, an opera fan, and this section is a stunning SNES depiction of that art form. The music constantly changes as plot beats unfold, dimming as you enter side rooms, and the little orchestra dudes are a nice animation touch, even if their movements don't match the music. All in all, it's a fantastically executed sequence. Celis takes Maria's place in the show to protect her from harm, and apparently sings her parts just as well. I'll be damned. She's supposedly even more beautiful too, as Locke, who has the hots for her, notes, but before the performance is over, Ultros, of all things, yeah, that squid-octopus hybrid boss from Leith River, shows up in a silly scene where he tries to interrupt the show by dropping a literal cartoon weight on top of Celis. Naturally, our heroes stop him, though Ultros once again flees like the comic relief villain he is. The real antagonist here is that rambling gambler dude named Setzer, who naturally has his airship ready to whisk Maria away. However, he captures Celis instead, of course, without realizing she's not the one he's after until he has her on board. Due to her beauty, though, he doesn't mind at all. After the rest of the party sneaks onto the ship, they pressure Setzer into helping them with his airship, and he agrees on the condition that Celis becomes his gal. I like his spirit. Yet soon after, Celis manages to trick Setzer with a flip of a double-headed coin, which he's not even mad about. Instead, he claims that being fooled makes him feel alive and is suddenly happy to help. Okay, this is contrived as all get out, but I suppose it fits with his roguelike nature, and hey, the party's got an airship now. In a slow, pretty scene, they fly their way toward the Empire and eventually infiltrate the imperial capital of Vector, which houses the entrance to Kefka's Magitech research facility, where Espers are used to power the Empire's weapons. This is the first place I'd call a proper dungeon so far, at least one that resembles the labyrinths of older games like FF2, which goes to show how far the series has grown since its early days. Personally, I like complex dungeons and wish FF6 had a few more of them, but this boss-filled romp scratches that itch for now. Setzer becomes a playable character soon enough as well, but his slots ability, while having the potential to fire off super powerful attacks, is too random for my taste, and he's middling otherwise. I kept him benched whenever possible. He can stick to flying the airship. At the research facility, the party meets Sid. I was wondering when a Sid would show up in this game. Having an old man character named Sid is one of the most well-known Final Fantasy tropes after all. This time, he's a researcher for the Empire who's having second thoughts and looks like a total dweeb in that yellow outfit. Not one of Square's better character designs, that's for sure. He warns the party that Celis is a spy for the Empire, a twist I probably should have seen coming considering she used to work for them. Sid knows this because he's the one who infused her with magical powers, hence her Rune Knight class, as well as experimented on Kefka. That explains then why he's so powerful too, and also why he's so demented. Speaking of which, that cackling clown man himself appears to once again attack the party, though in the chaos a bunch of important Magitech gets destroyed, and Celis reveals she's not actually down with Kefka when she warps him, his goons, and herself out of the factory before they can take down her newfound lover, Locke. Oh, and the rest of the party too. Nice to know she's actually on our side considering she's one of the best mages in the game. From there, it's back to check on Terra, where by the power of Magicite, she remembers her past. As it turns out, she was born in the land of the Espers, where her mother, Madeline, somehow ended up after getting sick of all the corruption in the human world and wandered into a storm. Ooh, how edgy. The Espers aren't sure how she got there, but figure their magical barrier must have weakened over time. Not wanting to return to the human world, Madeline falls in love with an Esper named Madouine and gives birth to Terra, only 2 years before Gestalt launched his attack on their land and took many of the Espers for his research. The village elder eventually creates the magical, sealed gate I mentioned earlier to keep Gestalt out for good, yet Terra and her mom get sucked through as well, where Gestalt, realizing Terra is half Esper, kills Madeline and takes her daughter with him. And with that, we've not only got a logical explanation of Terra's powers and how she ended up as the Empire's experimental monkey for most of her life, but she also returns to her normal form thanks to the Magicite, ready to join the party again. Now she can use the Morph command, also called Trance, in battle to change into her Esper form, which raises her stats. Nice. Although I typically forgot to use this much, as it's hardly necessary for Terra to be effective. Like a few of the previous games, Setzer's airship acts as a party hub, where you can chat with characters, add them to your party at will, or even unequip everyone not in the party all at once, making it easy to shuffle items and equipment around. Item management does get tedious by the endgame, but we're nowhere near there yet. Heck, we haven't even made it to Act 2. This is one story-heavy game, though it's mostly front-loaded. You'll see what I mean once we do reach the second act. Anywho, our next destination is none other than the sealed gate itself, as the party realizes they're gonna need help taking down the Empire and decides to plead their case to the Espers. Personally, this sounds insane considering the Espers that are still there pretty much hate humanity at this point, but hey, Terra's half Esper, so maybe she can convince them. Bah, if I were an Esper, I'd say hell no. That sealed gate seems to be holding up just fine, why not let the humans fight it out? Well, we're gonna find out why soon enough. Naturally, just as Terra's about to open the gate with her purple-haired magic powers, Kefka shows up for yet another boss battle. Though calling the fights against him we've had so far boss battles is a bit of a misnomer. They're more like story sequences, not really fights you have to worry about. Final Fantasy VI loves pulling its punches like this. I kinda wish these encounters were more interesting gameplay-wise, like how FF4 or even 5 did it. You can still have story stuff happen while allowing the possibility of failure. Instead, FF6 likes to baby the player. There won't be a truly tough Kefka fight until the very end. Up to this point, he feels more like a joke of a villain than he should, given what happens in said plot. Give the devs time to cook though, they're not nearly done developing Kefka as a villain yet. The Espers escape from the sealed gate once Terra, unseals it, but like anyone could have predicted, they're not here to help. They're pissed. They attack the party's airship, causing it to crash land near Vector of all places. The Imperial capital is ablaze after the rogue Espers attacked it as well, and none other than Emperor Gestal seems to realize he's in over his head. He promises to speak with the party later that night at a banquet, making for a unique dialogue sequence where your choices matter. That's pretty rare for a JRPG, I've got to give Square props. This also gives shades of Final Fantasy's future, as the next several games all do stuff like this, and it's good to see where that kind of gameplay twist originated. Since the Espers have gone wild and wreaked havoc everywhere, our former enemy now begs Terra to help stop them. In return, Gestal agrees to end his war and even sends his finest general, Leo, with the party to help stop the Espers. Oh, and he's imprisoned Kefka for war crimes. Okay, that seems too good to be true, especially since I knew going into this game that Kefka's the final boss. I think every JRPG fan at least knows that. Still, I was intrigued at how this would all work out, even if it is obvious Gestal can't be taken at his word. While traveling with Leo, our heroes reach the town of Tamasa, where everyone can use magic without needing magicite? Yeah, it's weird, but a dude named Strago explains. Long ago, some humans used magicite to gain magical powers and came to be known as the Magi. These people were thought to have died out ages ago in a war with normal humans, but have actually been hiding in Tamasa this whole time. Strago himself is a blue mage and joins the party to help them find the Roman Espers. Frankly, Strago feels like a late addition, an excuse to have a blue mage in the game since it's a fan-favorite class. And this is the point in FF6 where the plot starts getting a tad unmanageable. There's so much going on that just isn't all that relevant. And unfortunately, after spending so much time grinding up my blue mage skills in FF5, I didn't have the stomach to do that all again, so I can't comment much on Strago's usefulness in battle. Like I said, FF6 is so easy I didn't mind keeping this poor guy benched most of the time. Oh well, sorry Strago fans. I'm also hesitant to even mention Realm, Strago's adopted granddaughter who will join the party shortly. That's because her ability Sketch, which copies monster skills, is all but useless. You're better off using her as a pure magicite mage, and while she also feels tacked on story-wise, only here to bring the playable character total up to 14, she's at least useful in combat due to her high magic stat. The highest in the game, in fact, so I kinda like her. Moving on, the party finds the Espers hiding in a cave and learns that, just like Terra in the early game, they couldn't control their powers either during their recent rampage. They're sorry for causing so much suffering, and their leader, Yura, even apologizes to General Leo for it. However, it's to no avail. Suddenly, Kefka shows up, knocks out the party with his magical powers, and starts changing the Espers into magicite to absorb their power. Wait, he's supposed to be in jail. Leo, who's truly not a bad guy, attempts to take Kefka on, but the clown man once again wriggles out of the battle. In a badass scene, he takes the form of a phantom Gestalt to inform Leo that he and our heroes have been misled this whole time. Finally the obvious truth is revealed. Kefka was never actually in trouble, his jailing was a farce, and now he's back to collect the remaining magicite. But not before killing General Leo outright. No more Mr. Jokey Clown, from now on Kefka means business. The party mourns Leo in a somewhat contrived scene given how little time they knew him, but soon they've got bigger problems to worry about. Kefka and Gestalt have reached the sealed gate once again, and this time they're ready to use the power of the ancient Warring Triad. Oh, I haven't mentioned them? Don't worry, the game barely has either. They're a trio of godlike beings, now personified in living statues, who aren't yet well explained and at this point feel like a total ass pull. FF6, you're starting to lose me story-wise. I don't see why Kefka couldn't just use the power of the Espers to do what he's about to. And that would be breaking off a piece of the continent to float in the air. It's a sweet-looking effect, I only wish it were better explained. After several boss fights with the Imperial fleet, including yet another against Ultros for some reason, the party reaches this floating continent, which is more aptly described as a mini-dungeon. It's hardly an entire continent. When our heroes finally reach Kefka, he tries to force Celes to kill her friends, but she instead stabs Kefka, who bleeds for the first time. He is still only human after all. That at least explains why the battles against him so far have been wholly underwhelming, though I'm still not sure it was worth what's a relatively weak payoff. Then, in a rather cinematic battle, Emperor Gestalt stops Kefka, accusing him of going mad. He claims Kefka's become useless and threatens to put him down, hurling spells at his supposed underling, only for Kefka to block them, taunting the Emperor with a wag of his finger. I love little animation touches like that. It's very FF5, yet another example of Square taking influence from every previous Final Fantasy entry. Kefka then uses the power of the Warring Triad to kill Gestalt and goes absolutely insane, using his abilities to cause the Cataclysm. In one of the most awe-inspiring or fear-inducing scenes of the whole game, we witness Kefka's terrifying transformation of the planet as we know it, shifting the continents themselves to turn the map into what's, lovingly known as the World of Ruin. Yeah, Kefka's the only one running the show now, and the rest of the adventure is all about stopping him. Before that, however, the party must escape the floating continent in a timed sequence, one of many in the game, but in a sick trick from the developers, you're supposed to wait for as long as possible at the very end so that Shadow, the ninja dude who hasn't played much role in the plot yet has been here the whole time, can catch up with the party after holding Kefka off, and hopefully survive. Otherwise, he dies permanently. This is pretty weird since it's unintuitive as hell to choose the option to wait, twice, and then let the timer count down almost to 0. I like to think most players lost Shadow at this point on their first playthrough, and that keeping him is more of an Easter egg than anything, but nowadays it's the first thing any guide or walkthrough will warn you about, so some of that impact is lost. Still, it's an odd inclusion. In the newly formed so-called World of Ruin, the general structure of the game shifts to a wide-open approach where your goal is to gather as many, or as few, of your scattered party members you desire, then take your time training everyone up before the final battle with Kefka. This is essentially Act 2, and though there's not as much story from here till the end, I'll call out a few highlights. Cid gets stranded on a desert island with Celes, who's been trapped in a coma for a year. Yeah, lots of time has passed since Act 1, and with most of the world's plants and animals dying off in the meantime, things are looking grim. Wait, how did Celis eat this whole time? I don't see a feeding tube or IV anywhere. Maybe it's just magic, or more likely it's a frickin' video game and I should stop thinking about it too much. But then again, Sid does mention eating fish, which in short order will become a big factor in one of the most annoying sequences in the game. When Celis wakes up, Sid explains that they might be the only 2 people left in this new world. Yikes. Though since this is a JRPG, that obviously ain't true. Maybe he's just trying to get in her pants. I kid, relax. Celis actually calls him Granddad since he practically raised her, so that would be awfully strange. However, Sid himself has fallen ill and can even die here if Celis doesn't save him through a rather obtuse and incredibly lengthy section where she's gotta catch quote-unquote fast fish in the water nearby. You actually have to spot which fish are fast, and if there are none, they can only be reset by talking to Sid, which took me forever to figure out. Talk about unintuitive, and though I managed to save the old man, he doesn't play any further role in the plot, since he can die, and this is a SNES game, you can't expect complex branching paths. Visually, the World of Ruin offers a nice change-up from the old world map referred to as the World of Balance. Which reminds me, it's aesthetically pleasing how there's 2 different projections of the world map, the standard one you walk around on, and the more cinematic skewed version for when you're flying in the airship, among other uses. A few earlier SNES titles did this, Secret of Mana comes to mind, only they didn't pull it off quite as well. I imagine both versions of FF6's map use the same assets, but they look great, and I appreciate the devs' effort in adding animated ocean waves in both versions. Honestly, I'd go so far as to say the overworld looks even better than Final Fantasy VII's. This is outright one beautiful game, perhaps the most beautiful on the platform, and I've played most of the major SNES and Super Famicom games. The sprite work is amazing, hugely varied and detailed without ever looking too corny, except for maybe Sid's dumbass outfit. Sorry, I just think he looks so silly. The cinematic cutscenes must have blown people's minds back in the day. Flying to the southern continent on Setzer's airship after the opera scene stands out as quite poignant, as well as the opera scene itself, and of course the intro sequence. I also love how in certain tense scenarios the music will change to a unique track or leitmotif, then stay on that song even during battles. FFs 4 and 5 use this technique on occasion, but in 6 it's common and feels so modern in a way loads of SNES games don't. Hell, lots of actual modern JRPGs could still learn from this. I'll get into the music more later, but first let's finish up Act 2. As mentioned, there's not a ton of main plot progression in the World of Ruin, but you do get the opportunity to wrap up your party members' individual stories, among other optional quests, before finally taking on Kefka. While I'm sure many consider this disjointed approach one of Final Fantasy VI's strengths, to me the storytelling aspect of this second act falls flat due to the sheer number of characters, many of whom I didn't care about or even use much in my party. I already mentioned Locke's final moments with Rachel, which are further undercut by his ongoing love story with Celis, but he's far from the only character with underwhelming side plots. Cyan, the samurai from Doma, has been writing letters to a girl named Lola, pretending to be her soldier boyfriend who died in yet another Kefka attack. This ends in a cute scene where Lola confesses she knew all along that she wasn't talking to her lover, she just didn't want to admit it to herself. Yet, the letters helped her come to grips with her newfound lonesomeness. Maybe it's the 2D visuals, or maybe it's because I barely use Cyan, but I just found it hard to care. Finishing this quest feels like busy work more than anything. Lost love continues to be a theme as we learn more about Setzer. He once had a girlfriend named Daryl who, you guessed it, died before the start of the game. At least she ties into the story somewhat. See, she was also super into airships, and upon her death, Setzer buried her ship, the Falcon, beneath her tomb. When the party needs a new airship after Kefka's cataclysm destroyed Setzer's, we get a series of flashbacks to his past with Daryl as they descend the stairs into her tomb. These memories flash by as you walk, in a presentation style used only in this sequence and nowhere else. It's a very Nintendo approach to game design. In fact, saying FF6 was to 90s JRPGs as Mario Galaxy was to platformers would be an apt comparison. Look at more recent modern games like A Hat in Time, Balan Wonderworld, or Astrobot. Those games have Mario Galaxy written all over them. After Setzer turns the wreckage of the Falcon into the party's new airship, there isn't anything more to his story beyond a few lines of dialogue. Though in previous FF games, a few lines of dialogue is all you'd get in the first place. Here, the environmental storytelling of the tomb and staircase memories scene makes it feel more impactful than if Setzer had simply told the party about it. I like this, it's one of the better character stories for sure. Strago the Blue Mage, on the other hand, gets a throwaway story for a throwaway character. He even leaves the party before the World of Ruin, where after getting him again is optional. If you do, you learn he must avenge his friend Gung-Ho from the beast Haidon, Strago's nemesis who injured Gung-Ho. However, once you take out Haidon, Gung-Ho admits he's been faking his injury to give Strago the motivation to kill his nemesis. Okay, that's a tad extreme. I guess this works as an excuse to give the player another mini-dungeon to find, but it's a shonen plot trope that feels out of place. Realm, Strago's adopted granddaughter, more or less just tags along for Strago's story stuff, though she does get one funny scene where, during still another battle with Ultros, she befriends that squishy little sea creature and draws a portrait of him that makes him reflect on his existence since Realm's portraits come to life. This is actually pretty funny, even if the game stretches the Ultros jokes a little thin. Shadow's only real story is his backstory, revealed in dreams he has while sleeping at inns over the course of the game. Again, the appeal is primarily in how this story gets told rather than its contents. Breaking up the gameplay once in a while with dream sequences is a cool idea, even though Shadow's got a standard bad guy who regrets his past tale. As a former infamous train robber who refused to kill his wounded partner even when begged to do so, he fled the authorities and eventually moved to Tamasa, the town Strago and Realm are from. It's even hinted that he is Realm's father since he's the only other character who can wear her special memento ring. However, this is more of an Easter egg than anything. Apparently, Square had planned more scenes about this, but ended up cutting them for time. A shame, since Shadow could have been a compelling character. As is, most players probably won't even see him again after the action on the floating continent. Oh well. Finally, Terra faced hardship her entire life, so it's fitting that after getting separated from the party during the Cataclysm, she takes some time to discover what it means to be human. She's been bonding with the children of a town called Mobliz while defending them from a demon named Humbaba. At first, she refuses to rejoin the party, still unsure of her purpose in the world. However, when she uses her Esper form to destroy Humbaba for good, she realizes she loves the children of Mobliz, who accept her despite her frightening Esper form, and decides she must defeat Kefka for their sake. With that, she finally joins back up for good. During Act 2, the entire world map is open to explore, and there's plenty of content beyond gathering all the party members. In one cave, you come across statues of the three gods, aka the Warren Triad that Kefka used to cause this whole mess, and finally learn more about them. Basically, they've been fighting each other endlessly, and long ago, some humans got caught up in their war and became the Espers, forced to serve the gods in battle. It's not much of a backstory, but at least it's something. We also learn that Kefka not only tore the continents apart using the Triad's power, he's now made himself the god of this new world, destroying anyone who opposes him via the Light of Judgment, which sounds pretty sick. Basically, he's become the movie version of the Eye of Sauron, mixed with Death Star-like power, able to vaporize towns on a whim. Good thing Terra decided to stop him, eh? I would have thought she'd be in more of a hurry, but this is a JRPG after all. Gotta leave some time for character development. On top of that, ancient eldritch monsters that had been sealed away got released when Kefka reshaped the world, meaning we've got plenty of optional bosses, baby. I feel like this is the game where that series tradition really took off. 5 had a couple, and I believe 4 had a few as well, but neither of those compares to what's on offer here, including 8 legendary dragons who range in toughness. That's not to mention all the hidden weapons and other items to seek out if you so choose. Finding all this, plus grinding up Espers and other abilities, takes up a significant chunk of Act 2, dozens of hours even, though if you want, you can gather your party and go straight to Kefka in a relatively short amount of time. I don't recommend this. Half the fun of the World of Ruin is in finding new dungeons or revisiting towns to see how things have changed or how townsfolk are coping. An NPC in Narshe, for example, says she misses the old days, then the scene flashes back to her serene village life from before. There's no gameplay point to this, it's pure flavor, easy to miss if you're rushing to the end, which highlights Square's focus on even the smallest of details. However, I can't help but wish the game had more optional stuff to do in the first act instead of front-loading 20 hours of bite-sized linear vignettes. Sure, you can spend time grinding if you want, or do a bit of minimal exploration, but you don't get the chance to fully explore the map until you're already in the World of Ruin. A few of the later games, like FF8 and 12, are better about this, but I think I've gotta accept Final Fantasy has never been a series with a heavy focus on side questing. Besides, 6 definitely has the most optional stuff to do out of the 2D games, with an expansive world map comparable to other SNES greats like Dragon Quest VI. There's secret optional party members to find, including Mog, a recruitable Moogle I briefly mentioned earlier who's a strange hybrid of the Geomancer and Bard jobs from Final Fantasy III. Though instead of his attacks changing based on the terrain, a la the Geomancer, he learns dances in different environments which he can then use at any time, with the caveat that each dance has 4 random effects. These range from pure damage to bard-like implements such as healing or buffing the party. While I am a fan of the Geomancer in FF3, Mog's dances are too chance-based for my liking. I got him, but I sure didn't use him much. Still, it's neat that he's even in the game since he is optional, and his popularity is surely what cemented Moogles as a Final Fantasy mainstay. Curiously, though Moogles pop up a lot in future games, FF6 is the one where they play the strongest role in the plot, helping the party get out of pinches several times. With Mog in tow, you can also get Umaro, a Yeti living in Narshe mines who's barely worth a mention since 1, he's optional, and 2, he sucks. As a berserker character you can't directly control, I was categorically put off from using him, so I'll just move on. Another secret character, Go-Go, is a mime who, just like the joke boss with the same name from Final Fantasy V, can copy your party members' attacks to get a lot of free damage or other useful effects. In fact, it's theorized he is that boss from FF5 somehow transported to the world of Final Fantasy VI after falling into a portal in his own game. While that makes sense, I'll leave the theories to the lore nerds. In 6, he's yet another character I didn't bother with much since, while breaking battles with mimes can be fun, using them is too much work when I've already got party members I'm happy with. And with all party members in tow, or at least as many as you want to have, it's time to confront Kefka once and for all, who awaits atop a horrifying looking tower. You've got to climb your way up using 3 separate parties of 4, the only time the game requires you to use everyone you've got, even members you've been neglecting. It's still pretty easy as long as you've got enough characters and you don't make an entire party of duds. I gave each one of my 3 strong spellcasters, Terra, Celis, and Realm, but I do hate when JRPGs force me to use characters I haven't been training up. I suppose that's the whole point. It's the final dungeon, it ain't supposed to be a cakewalk, though since this is Final Fantasy VI, it's all easy anyway, including, unfortunately, the final boss fight itself. Kefka forces you to battle your way up an impressive-looking final spire containing 3 tiers of grotesque beings, monsters of flesh merged with steel, before taking on his final form that looks simultaneously angelic and demonic. Like I said though, it's an easy fight, one that's really more about the visuals, a total feast of creativity, and especially about the music. Dancing Mad, the final boss theme, is the most technically impressive song I've heard on the SNES. It's long, over 10 minutes, and starts off as an Emerson, Lake and Palmer sounding prog rock track, that organ, then shifts to a lengthy Bach-like Baroque sounding suite before switching back to straight up ELP prog, then again to Baroque, and finally to a mix of both that sounds freaking awesome. Nobuo Uematsu throws in operatic vocal samples as a final touch, making for a masterful piece of Baroque and prog-inspired 16-bit music. And in the context of a boss fight, nay, a final boss fight no less, it's perfect, fitting Kefka's lunatic personality to a T. This is one of those tracks that has clearly influenced JRPG boss music even to this day. You hear crazy stuff like this all the time now, but back then, it was wild stuff. This game came out in 1994, y'all. Speaking of music, this is definitely the best soundtrack of the 2D Final Fantasies. FF4's had a few stellar tracks, FF5's impressed me more than I expected with its cohesiveness, due in large part to those recurring guitar parts, but FF6? Its OST is on another level. Highlights include Terra's theme, of course, not to mention all the other leitmotifs featured throughout the game, like her equally impactful Awakening theme with its echoey flourishes, or the solemn Gestal Empire theme that plays when flying back to Vector after the Opera House, among numerous other times throughout the game. Cyan's piece, with its characteristic flute, always gets me, as does From That Day On, all the Opera House songs, the Phantom Forest, and especially Kefka's goofy yet sinister main theme. There's too many others to list here, but you've likely heard many of them even if you've never played the game, considering this is one of the most well-known SNES soundtracks ever. However, I've gotta say the primary battle theme is not one of my favorites. It's good, but I like quite a few of the battle tracks from other entries in the series a whole lot more. I don't know, this one feels unimpressive and uninspired, a little too derivative of previous themes, even though they're all loose variations on the same idea. Thankfully, FF7 changed things up completely, featuring one of the best combat tracks in the series, though not my favorite. For that, stay tuned for a video where I'll rank all the Final Fantasy battle themes. Trust me, it's gonna be a good one. While I'm on the topic of rankings, time to finish out my tier list of the mainline Final Fantasy games, not including remakes, and yeah, I'm still pretending FF16 doesn't exist, cause it messes up my whole newcomer's perspective thing I had going with this series. I know, I'll play it eventually, don't worry, and if you're curious, I've done retrospectives on all these games, so check out that playlist. All in all, while I very much enjoyed Final Fantasy VI, its disjointed storytelling that constantly swaps between parties and locations, while offering bite-sized gameplay vignettes for most of Act 1, drags it down from the top tier. That's just not my preferred style of JRPG, despite the game's stunning presentation. And the character roster is too large, making it hard for me to care about all the side plots, which the game spends so much time on. Pretty ironic considering I have complained about previous Final Fantasy games not having enough side content. Still, I rank this one as an A, above FF2 but below FF5, which hit damn near every mark I could want from a SNES Final Fantasy and offers better gameplay for my tastes due to its high level of customization. But we're not quite done with the story. After taking down Kefka in an ahead-of-its-time mid-credits scene, Terra uses her Esper form to help guide the party's airship out of the tower just as magic begins to disappear from the world once again. Apparently, since Kefka absorbed so much power from the Warren Triad, killing him causes all the magicite to disintegrate, thus removing humanity's ability to use magic, hopefully for good this time. Terra, now in tune with the world and inspired by the children of Mobliz, becomes fully human and lets her hair down, a common trope representing freedom from past burdens. Oh yeah, it's worth mentioning that you technically don't even need to recruit Terra in Act 2 to beat the game, but I can't imagine skipping her unless you're doing some kind of challenge run, and she'll show up for these final moments anyway. Overall, the developers at Square fulfilled their ambitious goals with Final Fantasy VI. It was designed not to have a main character, and while that's true gameplay-wise, Terra is the key to everything for much of the story, and the adventure both opens and closes on her, so it's safe to call her the protagonist. On the other hand, she leaves for large sections of the game, giving the other party members time to shine, though some stand out much more than others. Writing-wise, you can't go into a Final Fantasy game expecting Tolstoy. You've got to judge the writing and presentation against FF6's peers. In that respect, it absolutely holds up. Kefka, for example, is a well-developed villain. It's satisfying yet terrifying to watch his descent into madness and eventual totalitarian rule after quite literally remaking the world as he deigns. As a man who values gameplay over storytelling, FF6 mostly satisfies in that respect too. I only wish it had more focused mechanics with a little less fluff and smaller cast of characters. But does the game deserve its stellar reputation? Hell yeah, even if it's not my most highly rated Final Fantasy. Wow, after nearly 3 years of videos and 5 years of playing this incredible series, I've finally finished my Newcomer's Perspective journey through every main Final Fantasy game. I promise I'll get to FF16 eventually, but in the meantime, I've got a lot of other JRPGs to tackle, and hope you'll join me for more retrospectives and the occasional stream. As always, thanks for watching. I've been Leon from RPG Haven. Leave a like for that algorithm, subscribe for more videos on RPGs, let me know in the comments what you thought of this absolute classic, and have a blessed day.